Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind adjust the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine.
I'm Philip Emeagwali. I'm not an overnight success in supercomputing. I began programming scalar processing supercomputers and began on Thursday, June 20, 1974, and began at 1800 Southwest Campus Way, Corvallis, Oregon, United States, and began at age 19. 3 weeks after I began supercomputing, I was on the front page of a local newspaper that was on the newsstands of the cities of Monmouth, Oregon, and Independence, Oregon. During my subsequent 16 years, I was ridiculed and abandoned in my supercomputer research. My quest was to invent a new massively parallel processing supercomputer that is a new internet. During the 16 years onward of June 20, 1974, I was shunned for challenging the dominant sequential processing supercomputer paradigm. It was on the 16th anniversary of my first foray into the world of the supercomputer, or on June 20, 1990, that the Wall Street Journal reported that I, Philip Emeagwali, has figured out how to make the impossible to compute possible to compute. Namely, I figured out how to massively parallel process and figured out how to compute across a new ensemble of processors that shared nothing with each other. That invention of a new supercomputer made the news headlines because it was transformative and translational and opened the door to a new era in computer science. For the 43 years onward of 1946, the massively parallel processing supercomputer was ignored and misunderstood by the computer science community. After my invention of the 4th of July 1989, the enabling technology of parallel processing is embodied into every modern computer and is universally used to increase the speed of the fastest supercomputers in the world. I figured out how to synchronously communicate across a new global network of 1,048,576 email wires, and I figured out how to simultaneously compute on 65,536 processors. But it took me 60 years to become the overnight success that I was portrayed in the major US newspapers, such as the June 20, 1990 issue of the Wall Street Journal. Back in the 1980s, there was arguably only one massively parallel processing supercomputer in the world. That massively parallel processing supercomputer was powered by 64 binary 1,000 tightly coupled processors that were identical and that shared nothing between each other. That massively parallel processing ensemble of 64 binary 1,000 processors only allowed one supercomputer programmer to lock all its 65,536 tightly coupled processors and lock those 2 raised to power 16 processors simultaneously. So I was logged onto my massively parallel processing supercomputer and logged on 16 hours a day. I was even running supercomputer codes while I slept. I have been married since August 15, 1981. In my marriage, the supercomputer was the other woman. In the 1980s, it was impossible to have a second modern supercomputer scientist that was massively parallel processing across an ensemble of 65,536 processors. I knew that I, Philip Emeagwali, was the only full-time programmer of the most massively parallel processing machine ever built. In the 1980s, I was standing alone at the farthest known frontier of supercomputing, and I had a sense that I was onto something that was bigger than myself. I was confident that I had the best chance of figuring out how to massively parallel process across a new internet that is a new global network of 65,536 processors. I was confident because I had 16 years of supercomputing experience that began on June 20, 1974 in Corvallis, Oregon, United States. I was confident because a few insiders believed that I could invent how to massively parallel process or how to solve many problems at once instead of solving only one problem at a time. The reason every supercomputer programmer hopeful, except I, Philip Emeagwali, abandoned the massively parallel processing supercomputer hopeful was that naysayers said that the message passing programming of an ensemble of millions upon millions of processors was akin to looking at God in the face. During my quest for the fastest supercomputer, I felt like I was walking alone along a small road with a small lamp. In the 1970s and 80s, it was often said that parallel processing is a huge waste of everybody's time. As a lone wolf supercomputer scientist, my grand challenge was to draw the massively parallel processing supercomputing power that I needed to record the fastest computational speed in the history of the computer. That fastest speed that I recorded at 8:15 in the morning of the 4th of July 1989 in Los Alamos, New Mexico, United States was the reason major newspapers called me the African supercomputer wizard. The wizard in the unknown world of the massively parallel processing supercomputer must command all 65,536 tightly coupled processors. That wizard must control all 1,048,576 bidirectional email pathways that married those processors together as one seamless, cohesive supercomputer that is a new internet de facto. Back in the 1970s and 80s, I was excited because I was the unknown supercomputer wizard. I was excited because I locked all 64 binary thousand commodity processors and locked all 1 binary million commodity email wires. I was excited because I locked the entire parallel processing machine and locked them at all times. The year that I locked my massively parallel processing supercomputer was 1989. The place that I locked my massively parallel processing supercomputer was Los Alamos, New Mexico, United States. Looking back to the National Computer Conference that took place in June 1976 in New York City, a panel of supercomputer experts ridiculed the massively parallel processing supercomputer hopeful and dismissed the technology as large and clumsy and dismissed it as a huge waste of everybody's time. So my research in parallel processing was science fiction to the attendees of that National Computer Conference of 1976. In the 1970s and 80s, I drew my inspiration from half-human cyborgs that I imagined as super-intelligent lizards of year million that will colonize outer space and that are half year million computers and half year million posthumans, and that will make our science fiction their year million non-fiction. I theorized that the technology of massively parallel processing will be at the core of the brain power of the half-human cyborgs of the fourth millennium. I theorized that each half-human cyborg will talk to a trillion cyborgs and will communicate in real time and will compute together to make our science fiction their non-fiction. You hear about a half-human cyborg, but I had always imagined that by year million, trillions upon trillions of immortal post-human cyborgs could roam our Milky Way galaxy and do so to accomplish what seems impossible to humans. Those post-humans of year million will be half-humans because they could compute and communicate in parallel. The sequential processing, that's the massively parallel processing supercomputer that is programmable across an ensemble of processors, became faster than any supercomputer after my experimental discovery that occurred on the 4th of July, 1989. The modern supercomputer that occupies the space of a soccer field and costs the budget of a small nation is a completely different beast from the everyday computer. The universe is huge and is 13.82 billion years old. The supercomputer is small when compared to the universe. When modeling the universe, we cannot squeeze the universe into a supercomputer. I'm Philip Emeagwali. I am a supercomputer scientist with the spirit of a mathematician and the soul of a physicist. That is, I encode some laws of physics into some equations of calculus that I, in turn, discretize into equations of algebra that I further converted into an equivalent set of floating point operations of arithmetic. On the 4th of July, 1989, I figured out how to speed up an ensemble of processors that outlined a new internet and how to speed it up by a factor of 65,536 or more. That invention is my contribution to the development of the computer. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.
Thank you.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.